hear me? Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you all for coming. I hope you had a nice lunch. My name is Michal Levin, and I'm a UX designer for about 10 years now. And I wanted to talk to you about today about a topic that is very close to my heart, designing multi-device experiences. And specifically, I would like to focus on designing a product across multiple devices with different screen size and form factors and all that, but they are all part of the same ecosystem. And this idea of ecosystem, which essentially means offering your product across multiple connected devices, all interacting with one another and wirelessly sharing data, this notion is super critical for this discussion. And the reason is that, if we look around us, all these devices, they can actually relate to one another in various of ways. And once you start thinking about them as a system, they can actually form pretty powerful groups of experiences that are much more delightful and better serve people than each one of them in silo. And this is what I like to talk about today. So before we start, just a few brief words about where I come from. So as I said, I started my UX journey about 10 years ago in a leading UX design consultancy in Israel, which is called TZUR. About 4 years later, I moved to Modu, which was a very, very interesting company. And they developed this innovative new type of mobile ecosystem. And I have to say that back then I got really hooked on ecosystems and really saw how powerful these could be. Then in 2009 I joined Google and I became the first UX designer in Google Israel. And 2.5 years later I moved to the headquarters in California, which is where I'm currently at. Outside of my Google hours, I'm also the UX mentor at Upwest Labs, which is a startup accelerator in the Valley. And last, but definitely not least, earlier this year, I published this book, which I like to call my baby chameleon. I'm very, very excited about it. And the presentation that you will hear today is essentially represents the backbone for this book. Obviously, as a book, it goes much deeper in terms of analysis and use cases and discussion and so on. But still, this is the heart of it, so I hope you will find it useful. And with that, actually, I want to start off with a short video from the TV series Friends. So who's familiar with Friends? Just to check. Okay, Rachel, Ross, sounds familiar. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of context, so in this video, it's Thanksgiving Eve, and Rachel is in charge of the dessert. And she decides that she wants to make a traditional English trifle pie. Only what happens is that somewhere along the way, the cookbook pages get stuck together. She doesn't notice that, and she ends up making half an English pie and half a shepherd pie. Now, everyone else knows about it except for her. So let's see what happens.
Everybody, it's trifle time.
So now, Rach, this is a traditional English trifle, isn't it?
It sure is.
Wow. So then did you make it with beef or eggplant?
Beef.
I can't have any. You know I don't eat beef. Oh.
All right, Monica, I want you to have the first taste.
Really?
Oh, wait, you only got whipped cream in there. You got to take a bite with all the layers.
Okay.
Oh, you dropped a pea. Well.
It's good.
Really? How good?
It's so good that I feel really selfish about being the only one who's eating it. I think we should have everyone taste how good it is. Especially Ross.
Yeah, this is so good that I'm going to go enjoy it on the balcony. So that I can enjoy the view whilst I enjoy my dessert.
I'm gonna call my friend Mary and tell her how good this is from Monica's room.
I'll help you dial.
bathroom so I can look at it in the mirror as I eat it.
Okay, now what was that all about? Does it not taste good? Let me try it.
No, no, no. All done. So good. Maybe Chandler has some left. It tastes like feet.
I like it.
Are you kidding?
What's not to like? Custard, good. Jam, good. Meat, good.
Okay, question for you guys. Anyone wants to share what you think is the key line in this video, given our discussion? Okay, it's the post-lunch tiredness, it's fine. So, for me, at least, sorry? Yes, that's part of it. For me, that tastes like feet, really expresses it. And you know, I'm sorry for being blunt here, but what I love about this video, beyond the fact that I've seen it like 1,200 times and it still makes me laugh, is just how well it expresses the underlying idea behind ecosystem thinking. And that is that it's not enough to have a mix of good ingredients. You really need to make sure that they blend well, that they work together as a whole, because otherwise the whole thing might stink. So just to give you a sense of how powerful this multi-device revolution is, I picked up a couple of numbers about where we are today and, you know, just like the near future. And as you look through these numbers, you will probably see that they pretty much reinforce what we already see around us. You know, smartphones are everywhere. Tablet sales are skyrocketing. Wearables are quickly, you know, entering the consumers market, and the Internet of Things is just around the corner. And from UX perspective, what it actually entails is a very important behavior shift that is now taking place. And that is as people now own multiple devices, and they are already using them together, switching between them in order to accomplish a single goal. So this multi-device usage is already, you know, happening, and we are behind design-wise. And let me explain why. So to do that, I would like to introduce you to our core family of devices, which you are all probably familiar with: the smartphone, the tablet, the PC, and the TV. And they will accompany us throughout this entire presentation. I should note that, you know, multi-device experiences are definitely not limited to these devices, but because they are the most commonly used, I think they're just like easier to explain all the design approaches behind them. So with that, I'm happy to officially introduce you with my design framework, which I call the 3 C's, which stands for consistent, continuous, and complementary. And what these actually reflect is the different type of relationships you can have between devices as they stem from people's needs, goals, and use cases. So let's take a deeper look at each one to understand it better. We're going to start with consistent. So what is consistent design really? So consistent experience is really what, you know, you all see every day, or at least like companies who actually have a multi-device product. So it is most commonly used, and it basically, you take the same experience and you replicate it across all your devices. So you get the same core content and feature set on each device separately. It doesn't mean that the experience is 100% identical on each device. It can't and it shouldn't be, because still, like, you have different screen sizes and different sensors and form factors and interaction models, and you do need to make some adjustments. But still, overall, it's the same experience on each device. So let's see some examples. First example is Trulia. Who's familiar with Trulia? It's a product? Okay, so Trulia is an online product for real estate. So it is aimed at, you know, home buyers and renters and sellers and real estate professionals. And this is where you can go and search by a geographical area and price range, you know, all the properties that are up for rent or sale and all that. So if you look at these images, you can see a classic consistent experience. So what they actually do is what we call progressive disclosure of content as the screen gets bigger. So if I look at the phone, they have just like the core essence of the experience, which is this map view with the price bubbles, and once you interact with this price bubble, you see more details on that property. Once you move on to the bigger device, the tablet, you actually already get this like strip of properties that are pre-surfaced as you enter the screen. So you can actually either scroll through these and see all the properties, and once you touch one, it also highlights it in the price bubble, or you can go the other way around. So they're kind of like coordinated. And also like a search bar, appears here, just like all these mild adjustments because of the screen size. Once you move to the biggest one, so you get not only the map and the price and all the properties that are now moved to the left because of the screen orientation, you also get a bunch of filters, and as you play with it, like you get community information and so on. So again, the experience can be consumed on each device separately, and the differences are as what is surfaced at first glance and what requires a few more clicks. Second example is Hulu Plus. Who's familiar with Hulu Plus? Who's familiar with Netflix? It's kind of similar. Okay, so Hulu Plus is an ad-based online video streaming service that allows you, to watch TV and movies and music clips and other stuff. Hulu Plus is their paid version, and it's not only offering more content, but on more devices. So again, if you look through all these devices, you see that it's basically the same design, a big hero image that you can scroll through, like all kinds of promotion, and then all these categories that they surface, TV, kids, Q, recently watched, popular now, all these things, and they're the same across devices. Again, because this form factor is pretty small, we cannot show 4.5 categories as here, so they show 2.5, and again, all these little adjustments that you do because it's a different device. But still, essentially, the same experience. So I really love these two products. I think they have great design. But I kept asking myself, as I was seeing all these devices and thinking about it, I was like, can we do anything better? Can we actually take it further and provide a better experience? And my answer was yes. Because I think it's important to understand that while consistent experience provides access to everything, anywhere, anytime, which is a fantastic first step as we move into this multi-device world, it's not enough because it actually lacks a few key factors. The first one being context. So, maybe instead of offering me everything, anytime, anywhere, I would benefit more if you offered me the right thing at the right time, at the right place, which actually can simplify the UX per touch point. The second is the multi-device relationship. So again, if you actually have the same experience on each device, it becomes a device agnostic experience because it doesn't really matter which device you pick up. You just can have the whole experience from end to end. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't really leverage the different connections and relationships we can have between devices because they can complement each other, they can continue each other, they can supplement each other. So we have all these things that we can do now with all these small devices, but we kind of put it aside. The third point, best available device. So as you probably know, not all devices are aimed to do everything, and you probably see all kinds of usability issues when the same content and feature set is just moved into a small device. But other than that, again, people don't carry all their devices with them everywhere all the time, and they don't use them in the same way and in the same context. So actually, once you start understanding how people use the different devices in different contexts, you can actually customize the experience per that context. And last, but definitely not least, the scaling issue. So a few people before me talked about it, Internet of Things. This is where we're going. And replicating experiences would not work there. Because while today, the story is still kind of focused around these devices. When we think about devices, this is what mostly people design for. Very, very soon, it's going to be all that and more. And once you start understanding these devices, you cannot replicate experiences. Even if I just look at the smartwatches today, which is kind of getting some traction, you cannot have a whole app on this. And the whole, I think our role as designers is instead of replicating stuff and seeing how we can squeeze in everything on a 1.6-inch screen, we really need to articulate what is the role of this among all these other devices, and what does this device do really well and provide a superior experience to others that it is worth putting on here. And I think this is the kind of thinking that we need to do more and more. Think about all these devices that people have as a family, as a group, and really articulate how they relate to one another and what should be owned by each one. And for that, I would like to continue to the next two design approaches that can help accommodate that. So the next one is continuous experience, and let's understand what that is. So essentially, when I talk about continuous experience, is one device passing the torch to the next one. So a device picks up where the other one left off, again, assuming like this is what people are doing. So a good example is that you start watching a movie on one device and you continue on another device. I should say that continuous experiences can take two forms. One is just what I just said, like you continue the same action exactly across devices. But the second, which I actually think is much more interesting, is progressing along a sequence of actions that are very different in nature and happen in different contexts, but they still all lead to the same goal. So I want to give you an example for both. So for the first type, Amazon Kindle, I'm sure you all know it. So basically what it offers is a seamless reading experience across devices. You can start reading, on the train with your smartphone, and when you get home, you can pick up your tablet and continue there because it's a bigger device, it's easier to read in. That's one example. I think one smart thing that Amazon did that is worth to highlight is that they integrated with audible.com and then acquired them, but basically what they offer you is not just reading, but actually consuming the content, so you can either read or listen, and what it allows is to stretch this continuous experience along more context. So if before I could only read if I had something in my hands and I had to be in the right environment, now I can listen, continue like listening to the content while I drive, run, whether I lie in bed at night and the lights are off. So it's a pretty smart way to think about, what is reading really and how we can stretch that experience. The second example is all recipes. And what I love about this example is I feel that whenever I talk and I give this example, people have this like aha moment of, okay, I see why it actually can benefit people to have this like continuous and experience between devices. So let's talk about it a little bit more. All recipes, who knows what all recipes? You probably can guess from the name what it does. So basically it's about cooking, right? It's like this big system, it has a lot of features. But if I kind of like step back for a second and say, okay, what is cooking? Like what is the use case of cooking? So let's take as an example a use case. You want to make dinner for friends on Friday night, right? So the first step you need to do is kind of like decide, okay, what am I going to cook? So for that, you're going to need to take the time and do the search and read, how easy or hard it is, read all the user reviews and comments, and decide, based on the people, which kind of food you want to offer. So usually this exploratory phase takes place on the bigger screen devices just because it's more comfortable to see the result and scan through them. So this is an example from their tablet app of how you can see all the search results. But again, you can also do it on the desktop. Okay, so you chose everything you wanted to cook. Fantastic, you have a fabulous menu. Now, what all recipes offer is this thing called My Recipe Box. And this is where it gets interesting. Once you add to the My Recipe Box all the recipes that you want to make, they automatically extract all the ingredients from all the recipes, and they create on your phone a really nicely designed shopping list because of the understanding that the next step would be to go to the grocery store and buy all these things, right? And again, they could have populated it to all devices, right? But as Syriac was saying in his keynote, I can't imagine a lot of people going with their desktop to the grocery store and buying and, like marking off stuff. It just like doesn't make sense. This is what we have the mobile for. So they do it on the mobile, and everything is like categorized based on like dairy and fruit and vegetables and all that. So they make it easier for you. You don't need to go and take a piece of paper and write everything. Okay, you went to the grocery store, you bought everything, you came back home. Awesome. Now you actually need to make the food. So again, all recipes identified how tablets are becoming more and more of like cooking aids. A lot of people are using them organically instead of cookbooks, which is something that just happens. So once they identified it, again, they offer in their tablet app a really nice UI for cooking with the timer and all the instructions, and you see like which step you're on. So what it shows is that if you really like step back and take a compound use case like cooking and really try to portion it to the different steps that people are going through along their journey, you can really optimize based on the different devices that make sense and are optimized for that goal. The last example I want to give, to kind of like a little bit jump out of the 4 devices, is the Tesco Virtual Supermarket, which was mentioned in the previous session. I don't know how many of you actually saw it, because it was done in South Korea in one of the subway stations. But basically, it's a very interesting continuous experience because it also bridges the physical and the digital. So basically, you come to the subway station, you have this like huge digital board. You can just like take your phone and scan the QR codes. Then the experience is shifted into the phone, which becomes your shopping cart, and this is where you actually complete the transaction. And once this is completed, it shifts back to the physical world where you have all your groceries waiting for you by the end of the day at your door. So that's kind of like an interesting example for that. Okay, we talked about consistent and continuous. I want to talk about the last C, complementary. So what is complementary experience? Basically, it's having multiple devices working together as a group to create a new holistic experience as a connected group. So while the two patterns that we talked about earlier, you actually interact with one device at a time. In this case, you actually interact with multiple. And this experience also can take two forms. It can be a collaboration kind of experience. So you have like multiple devices, they are all equal, and each one is contributing to the overall experience. The second is control, where you have like the main experience happening on one device, let's say like for example the TV, and the other device controls something about that experience. So a common example is a smartphone that is used as a remote control for the TV. So I want to give a few more examples that will explain that. Real Racing 2, anyone's familiar with that? Very, very successful game. So Real Racing 2, they have a party play mode, which relies on Apple AirPlay's technology. And what it allows you to do is actually just like, everyone brings their iPhones, but basically if you have an Apple TV, iPad 2 an app, and iPhone 4S an app, you can just like go and everybody pulls out their devices and you can play, and it's like all these devices like take part collaboratively in the experience. So as you can see, like you have a split screen and also each one has their car and you can move like between different views, but it's kind of like this party play where if you take out these devices, the experience doesn't happen. Like you have to have all these devices like working together. A second example is TV tag, which actually represents a bigger set of experiences called second screen experience. So who heard this term, second screen experience? Okay, it's actually a very hot market right now. Basically, again, it's coming from realizing that people, like the TV watching experience is no longer passive. People have their other device, whether it's the phone or the tablet, and they engage with it while they watch TV. So why not use that device to actually create something that is coordinated with what's happening on the TV. So TV Tag is this companion app where when you start to watch a show, you check in to that app. And once you do that, you start getting a feed of all the buzzworthy moments in that show, which can be like quotes, it could be like scenes, some shots. And it's actually done manually by TV Tag's team of curators. They have more than 50 curators, and they just like in real time go over like a live feed of more than 70 social networks. So they really like pick out the best moments, and then of course you can play with it. You can like create memes and doodle, and you can share it with friends, and all that social aspect. What is interesting about that experience is that from development perspective or design perspective, you as the product developer actually need to develop only for one form factor, right? Because you only develop the app, and just by the fact that it takes place along with something that is broadcasted on the TV, from a user perspective, it's a multi-device experience. But for you, it's actually only developing for one device, which is probably like cheaper and easier than all the others. At the same time, what's easier for you is easier for others. So others also like understood that, and second screen experiences are now like popping out like like mushrooms after the rain. It's like pretty crazy. Just in the last, I think, Super Bowl, there were like, I counted more than 15 different complementary apps for that game. Okay, the last example, again, jumping a little bit out of those 4 devices, is Nest. Are you familiar with Nest? The smart thermostat, probably like the most beautiful thermostat you've ever seen. A very smart product. So again, the main experience is that, like adjusting what is the temperature. But at the same time, they also give you an app that can actually remotely control what's going on the thermostat. So you can change the temperature, like turn it on, turn it off, and you can do all remotely. So that's also an example of a control relationship, which I mentioned. Okay, so we talked about the 3 C's, consistent, continuous, and complementary. And I think that now you have a little bit of a better understanding of each one. So I do want to highlight one thing. They're not really like mutually exclusive. I kind of like presented them as a separate design approach just to kind of like clarify them. But in real life, most experiences are actually much more integrated. And if we go back to the Nest example, I showed it as a complementary experience, but actually, it's actually a mix of complementary and consistent, because by the fact that they allow you to control the thermostat with all these three devices, these devices share a consistent experience because they offer the same features, but each one of them is connected through control relationship to this. And the reason is that we need this integration is because, one, like we have multiple use cases. So in some cases, you do want to offer things across multiple devices. And also this like entire domain is just emerging. It's not always easy to say like in a clear-cut way, okay, this happens only on this device and this only happens on this device. So you sometimes do want to offer like some things across all these devices and some things that are going to be unique. So to summarize, talked about different devices, you know, and mentioned like the different size and form factor. So of course, size matters. Size matters in how you design for the product, in how people use it, in the context of use, in the interaction model, and other characteristics. However, it's never just about the size. And in our case, family matters too. And when I talk about family, I talk about looking at these devices as a connected group that has relationships between them. And within that scope, what actually matters most is context. And if there's one thing I wanted to take out of this entire presentation, it's probably this slide. And this is also where our lovely chameleon comes into play, as it has this amazing, you know, natural capability to adapt to its environment and the context. And I think that in the same way, we should start thinking about experiences as being selectively adapted when they are relevant. So it basically means like really parsing out portions of the experiences and applying them in a way that is appropriate based on the device and the context. And as you do that, and once you actually understand the user journey that you are trying to actually address, you need to ask yourself, okay, do I have consistent parts in it that, you know, would make sense and would help the user? Do I have continuous places where I should incorporate that? Or maybe I actually need a complementary experience. And either way, I really, really think that you need to think big, even if you start small. Because again, you know, we have a lot of startups, and especially like where I'm coming from, back in Israel, and also in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of startups, and building this like, you know, huge multi-device ecosystem with like 5 devices and all these features, something that is very costly, very hard. But at the same time, I really think that in order to make a change, you need to think big. You need to have like the full user story in front of you, and even if you then have some roadmap, or you decide to launch only on 2 devices, just like a partial feature set, that's fine. But make sure that you really plan for the big picture and see the end-to-end user journey. Because only in that way, I think, we can really change the world, which I hope is what we're all here for. And with that, thank you. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions.
예,
Hi.
이제부터 질문을 받을 예정인데요. 질문을 받기 전에 이번 질문에는 약간 당근이 있습니다. 그 연사께서 책을 미리 준비하셔서 그 질문하신 분들께는 나눠드릴 예정이거든요. 적극적인 참여 부탁드리겠습니다. 손 들어주시면 제가 마이크를 드리도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, do you have any questions? Sorry.
Hello, hello,
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Hyun Jung from Yonsei University, and thank you for your nice lecture. The one thing I'm curious about is that the consistency. You know, you told me that the consistency is basically each and every application should contain the whole experience, whole core experience, right? But because of the size matters. We should get rid of some contents also per devices. So, is there any your own standards that to choose which contents to put and which content throughout when you make some applications?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's hard to give one recipe for, okay, how do you decide, or this is the content you should take out. I think it depends on your product, and again, it goes back to really doing the analysis and understanding what you're trying to solve. It's like somehow everything goes back to the fundamentals of UX, which start with people. So you kind of need to understand what is your product about and what is the core offering. I do think that the core offering of the product, you usually want to offer it across multiple devices. So for example, all recipes, I think it's a good way to demonstrate that. Their core experience is basically the pool of recipes that they have. This is where they started, this is their core. So any device you pick up, you can always access this full pool of recipes. And again, because there is no, as I said, black and white, people never search for recipes while they're on their phone. That's not the case. So you also want to offer it there. At the same time, I think a shopping list, which again, it's not the core feature, but it's a really nice way to conceptually think about what people do with all these recipes. This is not offered on all devices, and it makes sense because you're kind of trying to analyze when do people use that, and what is it used for, and where is it used for, and does it make sense to put it there. I think another way to approach it is, in some cases, if you're not sure and you don't want to take out content necessarily, I think you can also prioritize it in the UI. So it doesn't have to have the same priority across all devices. There is a balance that you need to keep there because you also don't want people to relearn your app on every device that they pick up. But I do think you have some flexibility there in how you kind of prioritize and where do you put things more dominantly and where less. Again, it's hard to say, for me to say which content to take out, but I think it's basically you deciding what is the core of your experience. I would start by offering that across all devices. I do strongly suggest, and a couple of people talked about it, to get data. You put something out there, you might be scared to take it out, if something is very basic to what you're offering, offer it on all devices, but keep track, track data, collect, analytics, and see, okay, where do people use this? How do they use it? And if you find out, for example, that people don't use it at all at a certain device, maybe you can start deprecating it and replacing it with something else. So I think a lot of it is also kind of this iterative process that you have to go through. Does that answer your question?
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. So another hint.
아까 한국말로 좀 질문 드릴 건데요. 아까 말씀하셨던 것 중에 지금 계속 얘기해 주신 거는 보여주는 거에 대한 얘기인데요. 디바이스별로 액션이 다르잖아요. 그러니까 터치 스크린도 있고 마우스도 있고 그 부분에 대해서는 어떻게 생각하시는지 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Oh, that would be helpful. Sorry. Yes, you need to repeat it. A second.
똑같은 얘기 다시 해야
There's a
돼요.
multi-device challenge now.
예, 아까 계속 해주신 얘기 중에 많은 부분은 보여주는 거에 대한 얘기로 보이거든요. 그래서 컨시스턴스나 아니면 컨티뉴어스나 지금 유즈 케이스별로 해서 프로도미넌트를 보여주는 거에 대해서는 답이 됐다고 생각하는데요. 액션에 대해서 제가 지금 보여주신 것들은 조회성의 데이터이기 때문에 좀 다른데, 예를 들어 주문서에서 액션이 있을 때 어디서는 스크롤 다운을 하고 어디서는 마우스를 쓰고 어디서는 이제 사이즈를 더 키우고 이런 문제가 있기 때문에 이렇게 사용자 액션하고는 어떻게 생각하시는지 의견을 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Okay, so I hope that I understood your question properly. So you're talking more about the interaction model and the fact that, again, different devices you interact in different ways. Some are touch-based, some are mouse, some have remote control. I think this is part of the bigger constellation that kind of also impacts how people use devices and in which context and when they decide to use which one. I see it more as almost like a UI decision per device, whether it would make sense to offer a certain interaction model or open a menu from the left that shows and you scroll on mobile, but on desktop because you have more space, or you have the mouse that is much more accurate, you can put some menu at the top or menu on the side that is is static. I see it more as almost like a per device decision. Still, you want to think about them as a system, so I wouldn't change it too much between different form factors. But I'm not necessarily sure that this is core to the multi-device concept as a whole, and whether devices should complement each other, whether they should continue each other, because I see that more tied to the people and kind of like what is their user journey and how do they move between devices and what they are trying to achieve. And once you understand that and decide on the device approaches, per device you can see what is the best way to call to action or to define the interaction model. Is that helpful? Okay, cool. This is still a little bit loud. Sorry.
네, 다음 질문. 네.
그 실질적으로 이제 시간이 지나면 지날수록 기기가
Sorry. Yes.
실질적으로 시간이 지나면 지날수록 기기가 굉장히 다양해지고 4분의 인터넷 해갖고 굉장히 많은 디바이스가 생길 텐데 이렇게 디바이스에 3C 갖다가 통합하기에는 굉장히 많은 디바이스를 알아야 될 것 같거든요. 근데 그럴 때 접근 방법을 어떤 식으로 하는 게 효과적일지 궁금합니다.
Yeah. Okay, so devices diversified, which is kind of like the point you brought up. I think there are two ways to look at it. You can look at the smartphone market and how like you have like many more types of smartphones, different sizes, different ratios, different types. That's kind of like one level of diversification. On the other hand, it's kind of like the Internet of Things and all these like new devices, the bracelets and the smartwatches and the necklaces and like the bridges and like everything that is going to be connected, which is another type. I think, again, it's always good to back it up with data, but if you need to start from somewhere, I say anything that is under like the smartphone, I think you can assume a certain like usage based on what we know today. I think it gets more interesting as you talk about the diversification in terms of like new devices. And I think in that case, in certain ways, the fact that you cannot replicate the experience, if you think about glasses or you think about smartwatches or bracelets or like all these different things, you just can't. So I think it forces you to really analyze and ask, okay, where would people use it and why would they use it? And I think that like some people, and that's like, again, this is my personal opinion, I don't think that watches are going to replace smartphones. Because some people kind of like think this is where we're going. I'm not part of it. At least I think that it will happen maybe one day when we have projected display. Because there are things that are just like more convenient to do once you have bigger screens, once you can interact more comfortably. So I don't think it will go away. So I think it's more about, and this is why we have these context-driven approaches. You have to think about it. Like you have to kind of like see, okay, I have this smartphone and I have this watch. And this can do some stuff and this can do some stuff. But even if this could do like much more, like does it make sense? Like would people like, this would be like the best way to consume certain content? Would this be the best way to play with some apps? Like what is really this by being, and this goes back to the analysis, that some extra analysis we need to do today. Like this being a wearable that is on me, that is personal, what is it really good for and what can it offer that the phone can't or the tablet can't? So I almost feel that these approaches are inevitable. They're already happening because I feel that, you know, people already do that. Like people have TV that they do something with and they have the phone, they do something else. And like this is already happening because people don't use all the devices for everything. And it's more about being observant and really like understanding that and trying to analyze. And as new devices come in, you will need to step back, look at your journey map and say, okay, does it still work? And I do want to go back to the Amazon example because I think this is a little bit of that. Kind of like as technology advances, I really think you need to take the time and step back and say, okay, up until now when we talked about reading, all we could do is like give people a device that they could read on it. Okay, fantastic. Now we have all this voice recognition and like we have like this voice interaction. What does that mean about our product? And I think Amazon did this like a very wise thing by stepping back and say, okay, now we have this like new diversified interaction that we can do. Does that help us? Yes, that actually expands what we can do with reading because it's not really about reading. It's about consuming content. So now we have a new way to consume content. How does that integrate with the reading and how can we actually leverage on that? So I think in the same way, new devices come in, you need to ask, okay, who's gonna use them for what? Where do they shine? Where do they like really, when do they really, you know, provide extra benefits and try to kind of like tie them as a story, as a comprehensive story across all these devices. And I really like your question because I think one more thing that I'm also like struggling in my day-to-day is this is all very new. And in order for people to adopt it, you need to tell a comprehensive, cohesive story. Like you cannot just like launching everything out there and hoping that people pick up and understand what they need to do. Not going to happen. I can tell you that for this book, even like discovering about all recipes, I didn't discover it through like using them because they don't give any indications that one continues to the next. It was a lot of videos and playing around and reading and like thinking, and I needed to do a lot of legwork in order to even find out about these continuous experiences because I don't feel that there's enough good storytelling to people on how they can leverage on that. So I think once you clarify it for yourself how these like devices make up a cohesive story, you can also deliver it to people and they can start adopting it.